Hello, traders. As of yesterday, I had mentioned that bonds really need to give us a direction for the markets to have a significant breakdown here. And as of today, we still did not get out of this value area, weekly value area trading zone from last week. This developed out from last week's volume. And we could not push out above and start trending in our bonds yet. Not to say that it's not going to, because we have significant, huge uh, PMI data from several countries over in Europe. It starts in Asia. I think Japan even comes out overnight, and we're going to have, and that's the purchasing managers index, and that's one of the most important economic indicators to hit the markets. And we're having the IMF uh, global growth expectations have all been lowered going into these numbers. So that suggests to me that we're going to see a lot of PMI numbers missing in the overnight session, putting downward pressure on the initial opening markets out of Europe and Asia in the overnight session. Now, we had a mixed bag on the earnings tonight, but one of the key things, the most important earning that's going to be hitting this week, and that's Intel Corporation. So just keep that in mind. And we had some semis hit and gap up uh, this evening. So uh, we're getting a mixed bag. The earnings are suggesting the markets are going to go higher, but the economic data and forward looking indicators are suggesting we might see some global weakness coming uh, into the global indices in the overnight session. Okay. So, but yeah, we basically no confirmation on the TLT yet, and even the high yields are even looking relatively strong here. If you zoom in here on this, and we are at the bottom of last week's range, and it looks like we are actually trying to catch a bid going into the close on our high yield bonds. So that's bullish the equity markets. So just keep that stuff in mind real quick. On our ES, we had this upper trend line right here that we gapped up above this morning and immediately come crashing down. So higher prices, despite a very strong earnings out of IBM, higher prices were immediately rejected in the broader markets come this morning, and we did get a late afternoon responsive bounce, saving the uh, 26 area right above that area. And I'm thinking tomorrow we're going to come in at the very least retesting the 26 area, and the market's going to try to decide where to go from there. So just keep that in mind for your ESs. And then also on your NQs, that they were showing a little bit stronger relative strength this evening. And you see this trend line right here. It was holding. We came crashing down early on in the session. If you zoom in here, we came crashing down. It was leading the wet charge to the downside. And one of the main reasons I think there was some fear going into the NASDAQ, and that's the semiconductors. And ASML the night before reported earnings, and it just got decimated in the overnight session. And this is a semiconductor, but it did, that was the initial sell off, but it did manage to rally in today's session. This is a semiconductor, and it had very poor earnings. So it showed that there was a risk on appetite in the semiconductor space going into this earnings. And what we actually ended up with in the overnight session, or in today's session, LRCX. Okay. And this is a major semiconductor. This is is this at Lam Research? I think. I can't remember. I have to zoom it out. Give me a second here. Yeah, that's Lam Research. They had very positive. They beat on their earnings. Okay, they weren't hugely beat, but they also announced a buyback. So I can see a continuation setting up here in Lam Research because it's one like another semiconductor, and we're seeing some relative strength in our semiconductors all of a sudden. And we have had multiple people announcing that they think that the lows are in on the semiconductors coming out in the news today. And if you see right here, Lam Research is down here, we're going to be gapping up to 150 area. So we could see a substantial continuation in our semiconductors. And this is all great going into our Intel Corporation tomorrow. Okay. And it's is that after hours earnings aftermarket tomorrow. And basically what I'm seeing with the Intel, if you go on the, oh, I can see it right here. But basically, you have a some resistance zones right here on our Intel Corporation, and it has went into earnings before at this price point, and based on the expected move, I am seeing a strong possibility that Intel is going to be going to 50 or higher, depending on tomorrow's action. Based off the news, we've had multiple beyond multiple upgrades on Intel Corporation. So definitely a potential bid in our semiconductor setting up here to the long side. Another critical one that's going to be reporting tomorrow, that's ISRG, Intuitive. I always get tongue tied on it. Intuitive Surgical. There you go. And basically, last quarter they beat on earnings, but they had lower guidance, and the markets really did not like that. And here we are again, right back up to the range where they reported last quarter. So, to me, in my opinion, this is a chop box for Intuitive Surgical, and this is a responsive sell zone for this stock going into earnings. And so, depending on how they guide from here, it's going to have a major impact on how this stock performs going forward, in my opinion. Starbucks is setting up for earnings, coming off of an amazing earnings situation last quarter, and we are set up to be testing, if not breaking out, new 52-week highs in Starbucks going into earnings tomorrow. So just keep that in mind that Starbucks is on tap here. I think it's tomorrow morning. We're going to get the call out on Starbucks. So let me check this out, make sure it didn't hit overnight. No, yeah, it's tomorrow morning, Starbucks. So there are a lot of reasons here to think we're going to be possibly going higher here in these markets, in my opinion. So be really careful. Like I said, I do think we're going to be chopping out this week in the expected range, and we are right below the expected ranges right now. So there's a lot of potential for us to go to more to the upside, depending on how the economic data is taken over from the global markets in the overnight session. Our SPY managed to close back inside our expected moves, and we dojed out right smack dab in the middle of yesterday's candle. So this is not a necessarily bearish scenario. We seem to be holding this expected move for the week, and we could very easily catch a nice little bid into the end of the week, in my opinion. So let's see what happens here. But I sure wasn't wanting to take a directional with the news hitting and how the market's going to respond to that news in the overnight session. I wasn't. I was fine with waiting and seeing how the opened to decide which way to trade this market. Our Qs are another one. We managed to hold right inside our expected range. So right here at the lows, lots of potential for us to rally. We can rally, what is that? 6 points, 6 full points on the Qs here, potential, especially if we start seeing a bid in the semiconductors. And that is the major component in our Qs. So, seeing Lam Research doing what they're doing in the overnight sessions really got me feeling like that something serious is changing here in the the bearish sentiment in these markets. So, and if you notice, we've managed to close right on this trend line for, the second day in the row. So we'll see what happens. See how the markets digest that news from the global markets. Similar situation for the IWM, possible taking off. And then also I wanted to mention on Netflix, we've had 3 days of sell-off in Netflix since earnings. Typically on day 4, in a sell-off after earnings, you start looking for some long opportunities. So we could actually start seeing responsive buying in our FANG names, which seem to be, ever since Netflix reported, our FANG have been out of favor. Well, guess what? This is day 3 after it, so the FANG could start turning course here as early as tomorrow. And our diamonds are doing the best. They're holding up by far the best. We're right here we closed right here, right next to the highs on this market move, and it had a lot to do with the strong turnout in earnings on the Dow components and the overnight, like IBM for one. And so I am thinking we filled the gap here on our diamonds, and I think we're going to start breaking out to the upside on our diamonds, especially after seeing the positive results out of Lam Research. And this is probably going to put a driving force into our Intel Corporation, into the earnings, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens. Maybe the markets just want to wait, but Intel is by far the most important earnings of the week. And we do have one final stock, Bristol Myers. It is reporting too, and this could very easily outperform down at these levels. We'll see what happens here. It didn't really have much of any reaction. They bought out another company, so it's putting a little pressure on the stock. But this thing here could definitely squeeze Bristol Myers, because we are at a trend line support level. So yeah, this is a significant primary trend line. This is one of those situations I would wait for the news, and if it comes in after the earnings and breaks, then I would want to continue to the short side. But this is typically what I would consider to be an ideal long setup into earnings until proven otherwise. Okay, that's all I got to say. I'm keeping my video short. And there's a lot of airlines out. You got American Airlines, Love, and JetBlue hitting. So, your transports could definitely be a driving force, because I've already mentioned it. I've mentioned in the past, your semiconductors and your transports are the two most important things to keep the markets a bit under the markets. And here you go. You got, we're seeing positive results in our semiconductors. And now tomorrow, we're actually going to possibly see positive results in our airlines. There's really little reason to think the airlines are going to have a massive sell-off here. The weather's been good. They haven't had to worry about a lot of weather-related rescheduling. So there should be some. The only issue that airlines that I've heard of this past quarter is they're starting to see some pricing issues, or price competition, and it might be impacting their margins. But you hear a lot of that stuff before the earnings come out, and then they surprise to the upside. So I'm just not a huge believer that this market's just going to completely fall out of bed yet. Maybe later in March or April. Okay, thanks a lot.